My parents forced me to hand over half of every paycheck I made, not for bills, not for rent, but to fund my golden child brother's comfortable lifestyle. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Emily Parker. I'm 25 years old, and I work as a nurse here in Ohio. Nursing was never an easy job, but I chose it because I love helping people and wanted to build a stable life for myself. When I finally started earning, I felt proud. I thought this was the beginning of real independence, finally being able to take care of myself without leaning on anyone. But my parents had other plans, and that's where things started falling apart. To understand how this all began, you need to know my family. My mom, Linda, is controlling, the kind of person who always has to have the last word. My dad, Robert, is quiet, someone who prefers avoiding conflict, even when he should be speaking up. And then there's Jason, my younger brother. He's 23, unemployed, and completely spoiled. My parents treat him like he's some sort of prize, while I've always been treated like the background character in my own family. Growing up, Jason could do no wrong. If he got in trouble at school, my mom would laugh it off. If I brought home an A, she barely looked up from her phone. At Christmas, Jason got the expensive gifts while I got something cheap and practical. If there was one cookie left in the jar, it was always for Jason. I told myself that once I was older, things would get better. I'd make my own money, make my own choices, and finally be free from the favoritism that ruled our house. But I was wrong. When I landed my first nursing job, I was over the moon. The pay wasn't huge, but it was enough for rent, bills, and a little savings. I started to picture a small apartment of my own, maybe even a vacation down the line. Then my mom sat me down at the kitchen table with my dad beside her, silent as usual. She told me point blank that since I was working full-time now, it was only fair that I help support the family. At first, I thought she meant groceries, maybe some utilities. But no, she meant 50% of my paycheck every month. I remember my stomach dropping. Half of my pay? That was insane. I tried to argue, but Mom shut me down immediately. She said, "Your brother needs help getting started in life. He's still finding his path. You should be proud to support him." My dad just stared at the table and didn't say a word. Jason smirked like he had just won the lottery. The next payday, I handed over the money because I didn't see a way out. I felt sick watching my hard-earned cash disappear. Later, I found out exactly where it went. Not to bills, not to groceries, not even to some kind of family emergency. Jason had used my money to make a down payment on a new car. A shiny red one he drove around town, bragging to his friends about how lucky he was. He didn't work a single hour, yet he was living better than me, all because of my paycheck. That was the first time I realized just how deep the favoritism went. It wasn't just a childhood thing, something I could outgrow. It was my reality, even as an adult. My parents had chosen Jason as the golden child, and in their eyes, my only purpose was to keep his world running smoothly. It broke something inside me that day, and though I didn't know it yet, it was the start of a long, painful journey that would change everything. When I first started working at the hospital, it felt like the weight of years had finally lifted off my shoulders. I had studied hard, worked night shifts as a student, and poured everything I had into getting here. The moment that first paycheck landed in my hands, I thought, this is it. This is the start of the life I've been waiting for. I dreamed about setting up my own place, decorating it with little touches that reflected me, and finally enjoying the freedom that comes with being financially independent. But before I even had the chance to spend $1, my parents cornered me in the living room. My mom spoke with that sharp, commanding tone she always used, the kind that left no room for argument. She said it was only right that I give half of my pay each month for family support. My dad sat quietly on the couch, nodding along, though he never met my eyes. I tried to ask what exactly the money would be used for, but my mom cut me off. "We've given you everything," she said. "It's your turn to give back." Reluctantly, I agreed. What else could I do? Saying no would have caused a storm I wasn't ready for. So I handed over the money, watching half of my hard-earned paycheck vanish into my mother's purse. At first, I tried to convince myself it was fair. Families help each other. Maybe they needed it for mortgage payments or groceries. Maybe my dad was struggling with bills I didn't know about. I tried to silence the voice in my head that whispered it wasn't right. It didn't take long for the truth to show itself. One Saturday morning, Jason strutted into the driveway with a grin plastered across his face, jingling keys in his hand. Parked behind him was a sleek, shiny car. My car was a beat-up old thing I could barely rely on, but here was my brother, jobless, aimless, showing off a brand-new vehicle like he had earned it. Later, I noticed the fresh sneakers, the designer clothes, and the receipts from expensive restaurants crumpled in his pockets. The realization hit me like a punch. My parents hadn't asked for my help to keep the lights on or put food on the table. They had forced me to bankroll Jason's lifestyle. Every long shift I worked, every late night spent dragging myself through exhaustion at the hospital, was feeding his carefree existence. I was the one sacrificing sleep, pulling doubles, and dealing with patients in crisis, yet the rewards of my effort weren't mine to enjoy. They were handed to my brother like gifts he hadn't earned. That first betrayal cut deeper than I expected. It wasn't just about the money. It was the crushing knowledge that my parents saw me not as their daughter, but as a resource to be drained. My dreams of independence suddenly felt childish, like I'd been naive to think they would ever let me live for myself. I felt cornered, trapped in a role I never chose, forced to give and give while Jason reaped the benefit. I remember lying awake that night, staring at the ceiling, the numbers running through my mind. I could already see how long it would take me to save anything at this rate. The future I had imagined, my own apartment, my own space, was slipping further and further away. And all the while, Jason laughed in the next room, the sound of his video games echoing through the walls, while I lay there, realizing I was nothing more than his silent provider. The first time I tried to push back, my mom's expression hardened instantly. I told her I couldn't keep giving away so much of my pay, that I needed to save for myself. She folded her arms and said, "You're his sister. It's your duty to help him succeed." Her words were laced with the kind of guilt that had been used on me since childhood. It didn't matter how many hours I worked or how tired I was. If Jason needed something, it was automatically my responsibility. My dad sat there the whole time, as usual, saying nothing. He didn't even look at me, just kept his eyes on the floor, letting Mom's words hang heavy in the room. It felt like shouting into a void. No matter what I said, no one was listening. Jason, on the other hand, enjoyed every second of it. He leaned back in his chair, smirking, and asked if I'd like to see the new jacket he bought. It still had the tag dangling from it. Another time, he jingled his car keys in front of me, bragging about how smooth the engine was. "Thanks for the ride, sis," he'd say, grinning as if I should feel proud of him. Every little thing he did was a reminder that my sweat and effort were lining his pockets. That was when I decided to start keeping record. I pulled out a notebook and began writing down exactly how much I was handing over and where it ended up. New sneakers, a night at some fancy steakhouse, gas money for his car, clothes with brand names I couldn't afford for myself. Page after page filled with proof that my so-called family support was nothing more than a personal allowance for Jason. Each entry I wrote made my stomach twist tighter. My resentment grew every time I saw him walk through the door with shopping bags, laughing about some night out while I was dragging myself home from a double shift. He had no shame, no gratitude, just arrogance. And my parents allowed it, even encouraged it. I kept smiling on the outside, acting like I was fine, but inside, something was starting to boil. I couldn't stop thinking about how unfair it all was. I was giving and giving, while he was living carefree. My mom's voice echoed in my head, your duty, but I knew deep down that this wasn't duty. It was control. It was exploitation. And the more I wrote in that notebook, the more determined I became not to let it last forever. One evening after a long shift, I finally worked up the courage to sit my parents down and speak plainly. I told them I couldn't keep carrying the load alone, that Jason was old enough to contribute something of his own. I suggested maybe he apply at one of the stores nearby, or even try part-time work until he figured things out. My voice was steady, but inside, I was desperate for them to see reason. Instead of listening, my mom's eyes narrowed as if I had said something outrageous. "You're being selfish," she snapped. "Everything we've done for you, and this is how you repay us? By complaining about helping your brother." My dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but didn't add a word. The silence from his side of the room was louder than anything my mom had said. Before I could respond, Jason jumped in, leaning against the doorway with that smug grin. "You're just jealous," he said. "Face it, I'm the chosen one. You'll never be on my level." His tone wasn't joking. It was sharp, mocking, as though he truly believed it. Hearing those words out loud, spoken with such confidence, made my chest tighten. In that moment, the last pieces of denial slipped away. I had always told myself that maybe my parents loved us equally, just in different ways. That maybe I was imagining the imbalance, reading too much into the little thing. But Jason's arrogance and my parents' blind defense made it clear. There was no balance. There never had been. From the very beginning, he was first. I was an afterthought. The weight of that truth settled heavily on me. It wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't about groceries or bills or even fairness. It was about the fact that my parents would never see me as worthy, no matter how hard I worked or how much I sacrificed. That knowledge cut deeper than any argument we'd ever had. As Jason strutted away, still smirking, I kept my face calm, but inside something solidified. The betrayal was no longer just about losing part of my paycheck. It was about losing the hope that my parents could ever change. In that realization, a spark of determination flared. I didn't know how yet, but I knew one thing with certainty. I couldn't live under their control forever. One day, I was going to break free, and when I did, they would finally see what it felt like to be left with nothing. When the hospital offered me a promotion, it felt like a small light at the end of a very long tunnel. The raise wasn't enormous, but it was enough to finally give me some breathing room. I told myself I wouldn't mention it at home. I had learned the hard way that any bit of good news in my life somehow became Jason's benefit. So I smiled politely at work, tucked the details away, and decided this one thing would be mine to protect. But secrets in that house never lasted. Within a week, my mom confronted me in the kitchen, arms crossed, voice sharp. "So, you thought you could hide your new salary from us?" she demanded. I froze, realizing someone at work must have mentioned it, or maybe my dad had overheard something when I wasn't paying attention. However it happened, they knew. Instead of congratulating me, my parents immediately turned it into another demand. "Since you're making more," my mom said, "it's only fair you contribute more. Jason has big plans, and he needs extra support." My dad gave his usual nod, offering no resistance. My stomach sank. The small slice of freedom I thought I had gained vanished in seconds. As if that weren't enough, a few nights later I got a call that made my hands shake. Jason had taken my car without asking and ended up smashing it into a guardrail after drinking with his friends. The vehicle I depended on to get to work was wrecked. Instead of holding him accountable, my parents turned to me. My mom's voice was cold and matter-of-fact. "You'll have to pay for the repairs. Jason has enough stress already." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My car, my responsibility, my hard-earned savings, all being drained because my brother had been reckless. Jason didn't apologize, didn't even look guilty. He just shrugged and muttered something about bad luck. My parents defended him the entire time, as though I had somehow caused the accident by daring to own something he could ruin. That was the moment something in me snapped. I stood in the driveway staring at the dented hood of my car, the smell of gasoline still clinging to the air, and I knew I couldn't keep doing that. For years I had bent under the weight of their demands, told myself I was being a good daughter, convinced myself it would balance out eventually. But looking at the wreckage, I realized there was nothing left to balance. I was their workhorse, their wallet, their scapegoat, and nothing more. For the first time in my life, I felt anger that wasn't just a passing thought. It was steady, focused, and stronger than the guilt they had always used to control me. I made a silent vow right there beside my broken car. I was done. I would no longer play the role they wrote for me. They could call me ungrateful, selfish, jealous, whatever name they wanted. I didn't care anymore. What I did know was that I was finished being their doormat. Something had to change, and this time, I was going to be the one in control of what happened. After the wreck and the endless demands, I knew I couldn't fight them head-on. Every time I argued, I lost. So I chose a different path, one they wouldn't see coming. Quietly, on my lunch break one afternoon, I walked into a local credit union and opened an account in my own name. No shared access, no family ties, just mine. The moment I signed the papers, I felt something shift. For the first time, I had carved out a small corner of freedom they couldn't touch. From that day forward, each paycheck was divided differently. Half went into the account my parents already controlled, the one they watched like hawks. The other half slipped safely into the new account, out of their sight. When my mom asked why the checks seemed smaller, I kept my face calm and told her the hospital had cut back overtime, that my hours were being reduced. She frowned but accepted the excuse. Lying to her didn't even sting. It felt like survival. Week after week, I played the role they expected. I nodded when my mom lectured me, stayed silent when my dad avoided eye contact, and even forced a smile when Jason waved around his new toys. Outwardly, I was the same dutiful daughter. Inside, I was counting every dollar I tucked away, watching the balance grow. With each deposit, my pulse quickened. It wasn't much at first, but it was mine, untouched and untouchable. The hardest part was keeping my face neutral when Jason bragged. He'd flash new gadgets, talk about nights out, and make little digs about how lucky he was. I wanted to shout that he was living off money I no longer gave him, but I bit my tongue. Let him believe I was still funding his lifestyle. The truth was better kept hidden, because every day he believed the lie was another day closer to my escape. It wasn't just money I was collecting, it was power. Every secret deposit made me feel less like their servant and more like my own person. I started to imagine possibilities. A lease signed without their knowledge, a set of keys in my hand, a front door that only I could walk through. I never let those thoughts show on my face. Around them, I remained quiet, obedient, predictable. But when I closed my bedroom door at night, I would open the little notebook where I tracked my savings. The neat rows of numbers gave me strength. It was a plan written in ink, proof that I wasn't powerless. They still thought they controlled me, but in truth, the balance had already started to tip. The suspense of keeping such a secret was almost unbearable at times. My heart would race whenever my mom flipped through my purse or when Jason barged into my room without knocking. I lived with the constant fear they might find a receipt or glimpse a bank statement. But the risk made my determination stronger. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was preparing. One day, they'd look up and realize I was gone, and all their control would vanish with me. That thought, that picture of their shock, kept me steady as I played the part of the loyal daughter in their home while quietly building a future they couldn't steal. I waited until my savings reached a number that gave me confidence. Then I began searching quietly for a place of my own. I looked at listings during breaks at the hospital, visited apartments between shifts, and kept every brochure buried deep in my bag. Eventually, I found a modest one-bedroom across town. It wasn't flashy, but the moment I stepped inside and smelled the faint scent of fresh paint, I knew it was mine. Signing the lease felt like sealing a promise to myself, one I'd been building toward for months. From that day, I lived with a secret timeline. Each shift at work brought me closer to freedom. I bought boxes on the sly, stacking them at a coworker's place so my family wouldn't notice. Bit by bit, I smuggled out my life, clothes, personal things, even my favorite books. My coworker, Anna, helped me every step of the way. She never asked too many questions, just offered her car and her time, and I trusted her completely. When the final day arrived, I knew I couldn't let anyone suspect a thing. That morning, I ate breakfast at the kitchen table like always. My mom reminded me to transfer money. Jason strutted in bragging about some new game he'd bought, and my dad kept his usual silence. I smiled, nodded, and told them I'd be working late. They didn't think twice. The moment the front door shut behind me, my heart started pounding. At the hospital parking lot, Anna was waiting with her SUV. We drove straight back to the house, loading everything I had left in record time. Every creak of the floorboards made me flinch, terrified someone would walk in, but the house stayed quiet. By the time the sun dipped low, my room was stripped bare. No posters, no clothes, not even a pillow left behind. It looked like I had never lived there at all. That evening, I stood in my new apartment, surrounded by boxes stacked taller than me. The key was cold in my hand, but it felt like fire in my chest. I had finally done it. No more pretending, no more lies. This space was mine and mine alone. Back at the old house, though, the story played out differently. My parents returned to find the empty room. I wasn't there to see it, but I heard about the chaos later. My mom shrieked, demanding to know where I had gone. My dad just sat down, stunned into silence. And Jason, he lost it. He stormed around the house, shouting that his ATM had disappeared. He slammed doors, cursed, and acted like the world had betrayed him. While they fumed and raged, I sat on the floor of my new place, eating takeout straight from the box. The room was quiet, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator. For the first time in my life, the air felt light. I was no longer under their roof, no longer under their thumb. Jason could throw all the tantrums he wanted, but he would never see another dime from me. It didn't take long before my address found its way back to them. One evening, only a week after I moved in, there was a sharp knock at my door. When I opened it, my mom pushed past me without asking, my dad following behind like a shadow. Their eyes swept over the apartment, taking in the boxes I still hadn't unpacked. The air inside turned heavy. "We need to talk," my mom said, her tone clipped, as though she had every right to be there. "You think you can just walk out and leave your family struggling? You're coming back home, and you'll keep helping like before." I crossed my arms, my heartbeat steady despite the storm she carried in with her. "Not one more dollar," I told her flatly. "If you need support, you'll have to live off Jason now." The words hung in the air, sharp and final. My dad cleared his throat, but didn't speak. His silence was the same as always, agreement without responsibility. My mom's face flushed red, her voice rising. "Do you hear yourself? After everything we've done, this is how you treat us." That was when Jason appeared in the doorway behind them. He must have tagged along because he stepped inside without hesitation, glaring at me like I had stolen something. "You abandoned the family," he spat. "You left us when we needed you most. You're jealous, you always have been. Admit it, you can't stand that I'm the favorite." Hearing him say it so directly should have stung, but instead, it fueled me. I looked him straight in the eye. "You're right," I said. "You are the favorite. Always have been. Every time I worked hard, it was ignored. Every mistake you made was excused. Every dollar I earned was handed to you while I went without. You didn't need me. You needed my paycheck." For the first time, none of them had an answer. My mom opened her mouth, then closed it. Jason's face twisted in anger, but beneath it, I saw something else, panic. He had always believed I'd never stand up to them, that I'd keep bending no matter how much they took. "I'm done playing that role," I continued. "I won't sacrifice my life so you can sit around pretending you're entitled to everything. You want to keep him on a pedestal? Go ahead. but I won't be the one holding it up anymore. The room crackled with tension, but I didn't back down. My voice was calm, steady, final. For the first time in my life, I wasn't begging to be understood. I was stating the truth. My mom's glare faltered. My dad shifted uneasily. Jason clenched his fists, his jaw tight, but he had nothing left to throw at me. In that silence, I realized I had taken something back from them they could never replace: my power. They could scream, they could guilt, they could rage all they wanted, but none of it would move me. When they finally left, slamming the door behind them, the apartment felt different. It wasn't just four walls and a key anymore. It was proof that I had stood my ground and won. Once the stream of money dried up, Jason's perfect little world began to crumble piece by piece. The first blow came when he missed several payments on the car he had once paraded around like a trophy. One afternoon, the tow truck arrived, and the neighbors watched as it was hauled away. He tried to act like it didn't matter, but everyone knew it cut him deep. Without wheels, his nights out came to an abrupt end. Not long after, his girlfriend decided she'd had enough. She had stuck around for the perks, the dinners, the rides, the image of dating someone who looked like he had it all. When the gloss faded, so did her patience. She walked out, leaving Jason sulking in his room, lashing out at anyone who dared to talk to him. Bills began stacking on the kitchen counter, red notices peeking through envelope, credit card debt, overdue payments. Little reminders that luxury doesn't last when you've never earned it. I didn't need to see it firsthand. Whispers from relatives and the occasional slip of information told me everything I needed to know. It was only a matter of time before my mom came knocking. She showed up at my apartment, her expression carefully painted with worry instead of anger. "He's struggling," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Your brother needs help. He's not himself without your support." I looked her straight in the eye, no hesitation this time. "You created this monster," I told her. "Now live with it." My words landed heavy, and for once she didn't have a sharp reply. She just stood there, lips pressed together, before turning on her heel and leaving without another word. A few days later, my dad called me. His tone was quieter than usual, almost apologetic. "You were right," he admitted. "I should have stepped in sooner. But I can't go against her." His honesty caught me off guard, but it didn't change anything. The years of silence, the endless times he chose peace over fairness, had already spoken for him. His confession was too little, too late. As I hung up the phone, I realized their house was finally facing the weight of choices they had made long ago. Without me propping everything up, the cracks they ignored had widened into chasms. Jason was flailing, my mom was scrambling, and my dad was still hiding behind quiet work. For the first time, I wasn't part of the mess. Their downfall belonged entirely to them. Months passed, and the life I had dreamed of finally became real. My apartment slowly filled with the little things that made it mine. Curtains I chose, a second-hand couch I loved, even a plant by the window that thrived under my care. Each bill I paid came from my own earnings, and the relief of knowing no one else could touch my money was a freedom I had never felt before. At the hospital, my hard work was noticed, and colleagues treated me with respect. I was trusted, valued, and in control of my own path. Meanwhile, news about Jason trickled in from relatives and mutual acquaintances. Without the cushion of my paycheck, he had been forced into the workforce for the first time. The glamorous image he once flaunted was gone. Instead of cruising in his flashy car, he was now riding the bus to a retail job that barely covered his expenses. His bitterness showed in every complaint, every muttered comment about how unfair life had become. The entitlement he had been raised with had no place in the real world, and it ate at him every day. My parents, too, began to feel the weight of their choices. The endless favoritism, the blind defense of Jason at my expense, it had backfired. The child they poured everything into resented responsibility, while the one they overlooked had walked away for good. I knew they never expected me to cut ties so cleanly. For them, the silence from my end must have been deafening. They had lost the only child who could have carried them through hard times, and there was no one left to blame but themselves. I didn't take joy in their struggles the way Jason once gloated over mine. What I felt was something steadier, something sharper: satisfaction. My revenge wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't about shouting or proving myself to them. It was in the simple act of walking away, of refusing to be used any longer. By letting go, I forced them to live in the mess they created. Sometimes, when I sit on my balcony after a long day, the city lights flickering in the distance, I think about the past. Not with sadness, not with longing, just clarity. I see now that I never needed their approval, never needed their constant criticism or empty praise. What I needed was to believe in myself enough to leave. And that, in the end, was the sweetest revenge of all. Not breaking them down, but building myself up. Not ruining their lives, but refusing to let them ruin mine any longer. They had crowned Jason their chosen one, but by stepping out of their shadow, I proved to myself that I was never powerless. Their world collapsed without me, and mine finally began the moment I walked away. Do you think I made the right choice by walking away from my family, or should I have given them another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell.